Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum, in the podcast where I invite my guests to come on, talk to me all about their musical tastes, their memories, their experiences, and they get to create their fantasy festival, which I have christened Fantastivals. We are now on episode number 110, and before we start this one, I just want to say a massive thank you to Fraser Morgan, who was my guest in episode 109, an up-and-coming talent from Essex, and if you've not listened to that one, please go back and do so because he is going to be absolutely massive in the future. So that was episode 109. This is all about 110, and I'm delighted to introduce this gentleman onto the podcast. Singer, songwriter, is in many a great act, an excellent all-rounder. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ronan MacManus.
How you doing? You alright?
I'm all good. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, Ronan. Looking so forward to hearing all about your musical tastes and your fantasy festival. But before we do, I always like to check in with my guests from a mental health perspective to make sure that they're doing okay. So Ronan, basically, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm alright. I've had, I think coming out of the lockdown time, I think it's been a real kind of bit of a roller coaster, and I've got a bit of a history of mental health issues, so I do try to really keep a close eye on myself, and I do have dips, and you know, I've been up and down, I have to say, in the last couple of years. You know, lockdown was weird, kind of everything stopping. My wife's a nurse, so she was on the front line of this thing as she got busier and I got the least busy you could be, as the whole world realised that musicians are the least essential of all the less essential services. so we were the first ones out and last ones back in, basically. So it was a bit of a weird one, but things have picked up now, and people's behaviour has changed in terms of going out to live gigs and stuff. So there is a bit of a shift in there that's noticeable. But generally, I've sort of discovered maybe halfway into this year that people really started to relax into going into pubs and being normal at gigs again, which took a long time. People still seem to be reluctant, even other pubs have been open for a while, and the venues have been open for a while. There was still a reluctance. There was still empty seats at gigs where that had been sold out ticket wise, you know. So yeah, it's slowly coming back. We sort of feel like we're kind of back into it now, and that all helps the mental health to keep the creative juices flowing and have a reason to get out there on the stage and behind the microphones.
That's great to hear, Ronan. I'm so glad you're doing well as it stands. So I obviously introduced you as singer, songwriter, excellent all-rounder. I'm sure there's more to you than that, Ronan. So for anyone who's listening who doesn't know much about Ronan MacManus, who is the man who is on tonight's podcast?
Right, I have been playing music my entire life because I come from a musical family. The sort of go-to first sentence normally involves the words Elvis Costello, because he's my big brother and he's the kind of he sort of, his shadow kind of eclipses us all, and rightly so. He's done very well. Very, 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 very proud of him. So basically, he's my half brother, so he's like nearly a 20-year gap between him and then the four of us, what we call the second litter. So my dad's second marriage, basically. So we all came along, and 4 boys in 5 years, all became musical. We were all in a band together, which has its good sides and bad sides, as the Gallagher brothers, I'm sure, will tell you. But there was 4 of us, no, there's only 2 of them. But yeah, so I started playing Irish music when I was a kid, because we come from an Irish family, Irish background. So that was our first sort of go-to. But I've also had always had this sort of dual thing going on, where I was into sort of rock music as well, and songwriters, and always into singers. That's kind of, as you'll see from my festival lineup, you know, it's very sort of singer orientated. I've always come from a lyrical point of view, and songwriting was always my sort of passion, even when I was very young. You know, when I was a kid, I was starting to write music. I was maybe only mimicking my big brother, but it was kind of he sort of showed us that it was possible, that it wasn't a distant dream. It could be a job to aspire to do. So yeah. So that I've always had that sort of drive to create. But I spent most of my life making money from music, playing functions and gigs and everything. So every kind of musical outlet that I could do, from writing songs, recording albums, to doing birthday parties, and you know, I've made a living from music, which has helped me to be there for my kids, and married 20 years nearly, and 3 kids. So I was able to be home with them. So music served as well. I've released albums with the BibleCode Sundays, which, despite the name, is not a crazy Christian rock band. We are good lapsed Irish Catholics. So we recorded 4 albums of original music with that, which is kind of like a Irish rock crossover, London Irish music is what we call it. I have 2 solo albums and an EP. One of those solo albums actually was co-written with my brother Rory. It was originally a MacManus Brothers project, and then then he had to lead the project, so I released it under my own name, so it's now out there as That Elephant in the Room, it's called. And then 2 albums with Brand New Zeros, which is a project with Luke Dolan, my local barber and blues guitar god. So we sort of wrote a load of songs together and as a side project, and now that's actually become my sort of my latest thing that I've released. And my main focus at the moment is on the Brand New Zeros Back to Zero album. So I hope that kind of answers your question, all of that.
That was an amazing answer. You've literally gone through my entire discography of my notes for you and answered everything I was going to
ask. As quick as I could as well. That one down.
That was done so well.
There's a lot more tangents I could have gone off on there, but I'll let you off a little bit.
BibleCode Sundays currently still playing though, right? So you've just played the Powerhouse in Camden recently.
Yeah.
And that seemed to go down really well from what I saw at the weekend.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was kind of our main thing for about 15 years. From sort of the mid-2000s, we kind of started to write our own music and really push things. And we've done some great gigs with touring with Dropkick Murphys and, playing with Public Image Limited, John Lydon, and touring America, touring Italy, touring Europe, all the different things. I've done all that stuff, and we had a great time doing it. And then we lost our drummer. He died in 2017, so his 5th anniversary was literally last week. And that hit us all really hard, as you can imagine. And then I was still in the band for another year or so, and then I really had to kind of leave and get myself sorted because I was really struggling mental health wise, and all of us were kind of struggling to keep the band on the rails. Really, we sort of kept going, but it wasn't thriving, and I really needed to sort of get my head sorted. So I left in start of 2019, and then lockdown happened, and then everything kind of stopped. I started chatting with the boys again, and we kind of decided that we were going to do this big emotional reunion gig to sort of celebrate Carlton's life, because you never got a chance to do that.
Yeah.
And then the guitarist who had taken over the lead singing duties during lockdown had moved to Ireland. So when it came to it, it wasn't this big fanfare return. It was like, got some gigs needing covering, do you want to just come and do them? So that's how it ended up, because Ireland opened up much more slowly, so he wasn't able to come over and cover those gigs, but we were still open over here. We were just open over here. So I ended up kind of very typically just kind of, right, lads, okay, let's do it then. And then straight into the first song like we'd never been away. So that was quite nice. So but we've all got our own lives now, and it's kind of so we're not a creative going concern as such. We're not writing there's no plans for any new albums or any sort of new music, but the live thing is where there's still an appetite for that. Down saying, get back on the stage and do some gigs. So we kind of came back and did Paddy's Day earlier this year, and it was just sold out. Which has got off another funny story, because it was meant to be at Under the Bridge, Chelsea, which is, those that know the connection, it's actually underneath Chelsea Football Club, Chelsea Football Ground. Then, of course, when Putin invaded Ukraine, the sanctions on Chelsea, because it was owned by Roman Abramovich, meant that our Paddy's Day gig got cancelled because of Vladimir Putin, effectively, which is not a very consequence we thought that would be much of a connection to that. But so we had to move our gig to the Powerhouse that took on the gig, and it was a sold out gig anyway. And we had a great night, and it was a fantastic night. So we decided to do it all again in November. So that was just Saturday, just gone, and it was amazing, really great. So I think just coming together and doing the odd gig seems to be the right kind of pace for us now, because everyone's got kids and jobs and lives and yeah, sort of. So we're all kind of doing our own things creatively, which is great. I think it's a very healthy kind of connection now between us all. So we're not demanding too much of each other, just enjoying the times when we are together.
And he was actually on the album, but as well as your half brother, there was someone even more famous who is still pushing the music for you. He tweeted recently, I saw, which got an awful lot of interaction. So Russell Crowe played on Walk Like Kings and also keeps on pushing the BibleCode Sundays.
He does. We met him when it was another Elvis Costello connection, because he was in London filming Les Mis, the movie in 2012 when we played at the Albert Hall. Declan had a tour where he had lots of guest artists, because that was part of the tour. Part of the night was that he'd have guest singers up. So we were one of them. It was actually just the year after we'd lost Dad. So it was the first London gig that Dad wouldn't be at. So we had 4 of the 5 brothers on the stage at the same time in the Albert Hall. It was a real amazing thing. And Russell also happened to be on that show. So we had actually connected before that, because we wrote a song called Cinderella Man about Jim Braddock, the boxer. And he had played Jim Braddock in the movie Cinderella Man, as people may recall. Well, a friend of ours had cut together scenes of the movie to our song, and he had retweeted it.
Wow.
So when we met him, he was like, "Oh, I know you guys. You're that band that did Cinderella Man." So we got chatting to him, and then he was like, "Oh, it'd be great to do some stuff together," whatever it was, sort of passing conversation that you're not meant to follow up on. You're just meant to go, "Okay, thanks for your time." So then, when it came to Walk Like Kings, we weren't going to really do another album. And then we had a load of tracks sort of left over and from other recordings, and we thought, look, these tracks have been recorded and we may as well put them out. If you write 2 or 3 more songs, we've got an album. Let's do a final hurrah and let's get our friends on. So we just sort of thought, well, but why not ask? We've got our friend Lorraine O'Reilly is on it, our friend Ellie O'Keefe, both brilliant Irish singers, singer-songwriters in their own right as well. We had all sorts of guest musicians. We had my brother. We got a track which is all 5 brothers on and my dad's speaking voice. It was a song that I posthumously co-wrote with my dad. Found a poem about the Irish soldiers in the First World War, and of which his dad was one. And I wrote music to it. So that was Willie Redmond's Volunteers. Anyway, getting to your question, we emailed Russell Crowe and he said yes.
Wow.
So I had this really personal song called Hand in Hand, which was written about my parents' death, and I both lost them both within 2 weeks of each other. Really mad story, completely unrelated, but anyway. And it was a duet with Lorraine O'Reilly, my friend Lorraine. Anyway, so then when Russell came back, he said, "Well, the only song I really feel like I really love to do, what I feel like I can really add something to, is Hand in Hand." So it was quite a strange one to give up that one, because it was a personal song for me. But I did get to ring Lorraine and say, that duet you're doing with me, you're now doing with Russell Crowe. And she ended up going on tour with him, because he loved her so much, her voice so much, that he had done an album called The Indoor Garden Party with various other singers. And the girl singer couldn't do the UK and Europe tours, or UK tour, I think. So he said, asked Lorraine to do it. So she ended up, she now still sees him whenever he's in town. They go, she does more recordings with him and everything. So she goes to all the celebrity parties that he throws and everything. And we don't get an invite anymore. So it's she totally stepped over us, and I'm not bitter about it at all. No, he was a really good guy, and he came down. He was very generous with his time, and he invited us to the parties and all afterwards, and we had a good time meeting all sorts of people. But yeah, he's a lovely guy, very generous. And we actually ended up in the one show randomly on a Paddy's Day, and he was on it as well. This is before we asked him to do the thing, and there was a bit of a break in the recording, and he crossed the studio. He happened to be a guest, we didn't know. He crossed the studio and hugged us like we were old friends, and made us look really cool in front of all the people in the studio. And so yeah, we just that was kind of a strange crossing of paths over the years that led to a really nice version of a very personal song. And he still continues to push us, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to do that, does he?
No, not at all. It's fantastic that he does. Clearly, is still into the music, which is what it's all about, which is great. So you mentioned Brand New Zeros earlier, which is like your focus. You've just released the album Back to Zero. It's just on streaming platforms now. You can get physically as well, I believe.
Yeah. We did some vinyl, and there's going to be some CDs coming actually, which is this is actually exclusive announcement. We've been in the studio and recorded a load of acoustic tracks. So the CD version, which we'll be releasing, will have a load of extra tracks on it, acoustic tracks, some unreleased, some acoustic versions of the album. But yeah, it's all across all streaming platforms. We try and push people towards Bandcamp, because that's the one where we actually make some money. Otherwise, the money just goes into the Spotify's coffers and we don't get anything from it. The Back to Zero album was actually started when Carlton was still alive, and we wanted to write. The first album we did with Brand New Zeros was basically myself and Luke wrote all the songs, and then we kind of got together in a studio and knocked them together, and that was it. It wasn't really meant to be a full band. Whereas the second album, we thought we're going to write with the boys, get it all together. So we had Enda Malloy he's the bass player in the BibleCode Sundays. Carlton was the drummer in the BibleCode Sundays. So we asked them to come across and play with us on Brand New Zeros as well. So Carlton, we wanted to go in and start recording some tracks. So we actually started the album. And then after he died, we kind of shelved it all. And then when I left the BibleCodes, fast forward to 2019, and then Ian Sefton, who runs Fretsaw Records, phoned me up and said, I'm going to be starting this record label, because he had done a mental health charity album just at the end of 2018, which I've been part of. And he said, I want to do this record label. I want to sign you. And I was like, okay, I don't know where I am in my life. I was in really low ebb at that point. And then ended up signing, and the idea was it was going to be a solo album. But as we finished it, we realised that we had kind of finished off the Brand New Zero second album that we'd started. Really hadn't really meant to do it that way. So we saw Carlton's on some of the album, which is great. And there's a track especially called, which is interesting, called This Love, where it was a jam between Carlton and Luke in the studio. And I came in, they were playing this riff, and we just pressed play and record and just see what happens. And they were just jamming this thing. And I came in and picked up the microphone and started improvising some lyrics. I had some lyrics on my phone and started just improvising something on top of that. And we recorded it all, and that came out in one go. That moment happened, and the song came out in one go. And then we basically just, after Carlton died, we couldn't repeat it, so it was just a vibe on there, and we just basically said, right, we're just going to build on this recording. So that recording that we have on the album of a song called This Love is the only time that song ever happened, and it's just this amazing little piece of really personal kind of the way that we just a little moment in our time, which was really special for us. So it's there's some really emotional moments in there, and it's just a lot of fun rock and roll as well.
Yeah, I got to say, I was listening to the album quite a bit recently, and I think it's a great album. It's got, like you said, some real rock and roll tracks. It's got some really sweet, laid-back acoustic tracks. It's a very consistent album, and there's not a track that I would press skip on, which is rare. For an album these days, it's a very good.
I'll take that.
11. No, it's a great album, and I can't recommend it highly enough. And like we said, you can stream it on any platform, but Bandcamp is the one to go to, right? If people want to visit.
We have vinyl records of it, all on Bandcamp. But we actually finished it just in January of 2020. Just in time for the world to shut down. So we've basically revived it recently. We released something digitally during lockdown, but we'd lost all our momentum, so we kind of shelved it all. And now it's still a new album to us, because we haven't done anything. We haven't had a chance to do anything with it until recently. So lots of plans next year to do lots of things with that album, and lots of re-releases, and there's some videos that are out there which we have. People can go check them out on YouTube, Brand New Zeros channel. And we just want to try and push that music out there, because we're really proud of the album, and it's especially special to us with Carlton's involvement and sort of being gone now. We think, well, he's still playing. If people are still playing that album, he's still playing drums. So that's reason enough to keep it going.
Great stuff, lovely touch. I love hearing about emotional moments like that you might not realise when listening to the album, but into people like yourself, and you get to learn little insights about the album. It means next time I hear that track, or anyone's listening to this podcast and listens to that track, will have that special connection with it, which is what it's all about, really. So,
thank you. Yeah.
Ronan, without giving away too many spoilers, you mentioned Irish music was a large part of your childhood and your heritage. Is that what music you're into currently? I mean, what are you into currently? What does it for you?
I listen to so much different stuff. I do love getting into some really good folk and some really good Irish folk, especially. But I just as much I like singer-songwriters. I would listen. I would sit back and listen to the most depressing music if I was left to my own devices. So there's people like Sierra Eagleson I really love. I discovered her during lockdown. She's a beautiful voice. She's just about to release an album, I think. And people like Jeffrey Martin as an American singer-songwriter, sort of finger-picking, beautiful, just amazing. So I listen to a lot of that stuff, and then I still love all, I'm a big grunge head when I was a teenager, and that's a bit of a spoiler alert for later on, but I got that. I was just the right age to hit the grunge era, so I still love all that stuff, and the sort of heavy, dirgy guitars, and then I absolutely, because I'm also a songwriter, I've done a bit of pop writing, so then I will listen to some Dua Lipa, and I'll love some Harry Styles, and there's some the songwriting alone in those. This is songwriters giving songs to pop writers normally. But there's someone like Taylor Swift. She's a great songwriter in her own right. So I I do love a good pop song, and I do love a good headbang. Although I'm getting a bit old for that now. But I just love a bit of folky stuff. Lots of different stuff. Yeah, lots of different stuff.
What are you currently listening to, Ronan? What's been on the playlist for the last couple of days or weeks?
I made some playlists during lockdown. One's called "Understanding Sadness," which is an Ian Prowse song, and I just basically found all loads of sad songs and put them all together. And there's some really great ones on there. And I've been listening actually. Because of this podcast, it's actually got me looking back on some Lemonheads, which is we'll talk about later on. But some of that stuff is that I just love I'm very much a lyric guy, really, and so I've been listening to a lot of that recently, and a lot of different acoustic stuff, really. So I do like Ron Sexsmith is a personal favourite of mine, Canadian singer-songwriter, very good. So, been listening to a lot of acoustic folk recently, I have to say.
Never a bad thing, acoustic folk. It's all good. It's where it's at. Definitely where it's.
I just find it just soothes my head, especially when I spent the day today on the tube going up to London to do an Irish trad gig in the Excel Exhibition Centre in Docklands, and just to make sure your eyes are surrounded by lots of busy people in central London going on the tube, so it's nice for my ears to be somewhere else. So to listen to a bit of Jeffrey Martin or some Bon Iver or something like that, it just kind of takes me a different place. It soothes me a little bit, so it's kind of good.
So let me take you back then, Ronan, when you was a bit younger, a bit of money in your pocket, and you're starting to get influenced by music, and you wanted to go out and buy your first album or single. Do you remember what they were and where you got them from?
Well, most of the early albums I listened to was kind of stuff that my dad had, and then I had two older brothers living in the house. Well, I've got three older brothers, including Declan. He gave us a lot of albums, but they're mostly his.
I was going to say,
which is great because you get lots of free albums early, Elvis Costello stuff, which is great. And then my two older brothers were listening to lots of different stuff. They were listening to a lot of acid jazz, the sort of James Taylor Quartet stuff, and then an indie, a lot of kind of like that Manchester indie stuff. So I kind of nicked a lot of my early records of them. But the first album that I really bought and got into, the first music that really was mine was Pearl Jam. But I have to say my gateway drug into that was stealing Nirvana Nevermind off my brother Liam. That got me into it. But the first thing that I bought, all my singles that I used to buy at Woolworths before that were like, where it was in the charts. So it was something like Elton John Sacrifice or Nessun Dorma in 1990 when the World Cup was on. Everyone bought Nessun Dorma for some reason. But the first album that I got, which I bought on tape, so I was just showing my age, in Woolworths, just also showing my age because that's gone as well, but was Pearl Jam 10. That's the album that I really got and just completely consumed, and it consumed me, and I still love them today. I still a part of me that just wants to be Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam. And you never quite lose. That's one of the things, the great thing about Brand New Zeros when we started, Luke was massive into Pearl Jam as well, as was End, bass player. We kind of tapped into our teenage selves when we started writing those songs. It was that had that vibe about it, and it was just so nice, so inspiring to kind of tap into that version of you. You're so excited, and you just feel like you've discovered this magic secret. And Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam was certainly that for me.
And they're still going strong. God bless Pearl Jam. So this podcast, Ronan, all about you collating your fantasy festival. But are you a big festival fan? Have you been to many? I
went to Glastonbury a few years. We played Glastonbury. It was the first time that I went to a festival. I'm not in the old days. I've been sober 5 years now, but I wasn't always sober. So the festivals I went to, I didn't really see a huge amount of music. I was enjoying myself far too much. So, but I went to Glastonbury. We played Glastonbury, and half the band, 6-piece band, half of us went for 5 days, and half of us just turned up for the gig. And you could tell, looking at us, it was this tiny little stage down by the Avalon. It was a BibleCode Sundays gig, so it was the folky kind of thing. And we were down the Avalon Cafe stage. It was the cafe opposite the Avalon stage. Yeah, so that was the first festival I went to, because I was always gigging. My whole life I've been gigging since I was 17, so I never really ever saw many football matches, didn't see many gigs, didn't really do all those things because I was always earning money, always working myself. So that was the first time I went was Glastonbury when we played it, and then we actually went the 2 years after that just as a punter, and then it was a fallow year which they do every so often, where they don't, where it's not on. And then that was it. I lost the momentum of it all. But I just remember sitting back one afternoon and watching 4 bands in a row. I think it was Crowded House was definitely one, Katie Tunstall was one, C6 Steve, and there's another one I can't remember what it was, but it was a wicked just afternoon sitting down with a box of wine. This is why I don't drink anymore. But it wasn't even the box; it was just a silver bag inside. Anyone who's been in a festival probably knows about that silver bag. That's inside a box of wine. So just filling my wine glass and just sun was shining, which is rare for Glastonbury, and just watched an afternoon of music back to back. It was great. But Glaston's the one that I've been at the most and done the Flower at Finsbury, not Flower, it was the Fesh at Finsbury Park, but it was a Vince Power gig, and then we did the Fesh when they moved out to Liverpool, which was great, going to a place where my family has many connections up in Liverpool, so that was great, playing on the Pierhead there. So I've not got a huge history of festivals apart from the ones I've played.
And what about gigs, Ronan? Do you have a favourite gig that you've sat back and watched as a punter? Is there one that you always remember and look back on fondly?
As an adult, because I went to gigs as a kid, which my brother's gig. The first ever gig I went to at a big stage that I can remember was seeing my brother when I was a kid at the Hammersmith Apollo, as it was known then. Hammersmith Odeon, as it was known then, Hammersmith Apollo now, and supported by the Pogues.
Wow.
Which was quite a sight to see for a young lad. Considering I've done sort of Irish rock music or sort of poguesy sort of music rest of my life, I can't help but think maybe it influenced me somehow. But in recent years, I got to see Pearl Jam because I never got to see it when I was a teenager because we lived in Twickenham and Brixton, where they always played Brixton, and that seemed like a million miles away. And I was never brave enough to get on the trains and go to Brixton from leafy Twickenham. So I never saw them when I was a teenager, and then I saw them in recent years. Seen them a good few times in recent years. Those ones have been great, and I managed to see Crowded House this year as well. So Pearl Jam and Crowded House this year, both for free, because my friends had tickets from 2020. The gigs that got cancelled when they got rearranged. My friends couldn't go, so they offered them to me. So I got to see both of my favourite bands for nothing, which is great.
That's
Generous friends is what everybody needs.
Yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. So that is a bit about Ronan and a fantastic musical story so far. Like I said at the top of the podcast, this is all about getting our guests to collate their fantasy festival. So Ronan gets to choose any 5 acts, one of who must play one of their studio albums in full, and an encore which all 5 acts can perform together at the end of his fantasy festival. So it's very simple. 5 acts take 5 time slots. In the last episode of the podcast, I had Fraser Morgan on, and he created his Frostage Fest Fantasy Festival, and he went with a new music acts for his opening 3 acts. So in his opening act, he went for Jack Walsh. In his Super Seconds act, he went for Armoured Man, and in his Midway Madness slot, he went for Grebo. All new acts up and coming around the Essex area. In his pre-headline act slot, he went for Jerry Cinnamon, who made his first Fantasy Festival appearance. And for his headline act, Fraser picked the Front Bottoms, who I hadn't heard of much, but they are a great band. And for his encore, he had all 5 acts perform the track Your Heart is a Muscle, the Size of Your Fist. So a great lineup there from Fraser. So that's how simple the Fantasy Festival element is. But Ronan, before we talk about your acts, we need to name your Fantasy Festival and we need to find a venue for it. So Ronan, what are you going to call your Fantasy Festival?
It's the worst thing in the world. It's trying to. I've spent years trying to think of good band names, and I don't think if you listen to the band names I've got, I quite like Brand New Zeros, but the rest of because it's the worst thing in the world trying to find band names. So this was a bit of a nightmare. I went through all sorts of ideas of. I don't know if anybody's had Chicken Stock yet, but I quite like that.
Not bad.
I wanted to do something about lyrics and words, but I couldn't find it. It was all sounded too poncy. So I'm going to call it X Fest.
Okay.
Because of where my venue is.
Okay, so we've got X Fest, and you can take us anywhere, Ronan.
It's EX. It's EX, not just the letter
X.
X.
EX. All right, I like it. You can take us anywhere you like, Ronan. You can take us back to Powerhouse. You can take us to Hammersmith Apollo. You can take us across the pond to the States, to Australia. You can take us to Ireland. Wherever you go, we'll come and watch X Fest. So where are you going to take us?
Exmouth Beach, down in Devon. So I go there every year with my wife's family. It's a family holiday that's been going, a family tradition that's been going on in her family since before she was born. I'm talking 150 to 200 of her family go there every year. and it is a crazy week, and then we stay for the second week. It is an amazing thing, and during lockdown, there'll be one night we all get together and do a rather cheesy karaoke night in the Exmouth Pavilion. But during lockdown, we couldn't do it, so I got the guitar out on the beach and just sang to the family on the beach. So I've already sort of played that festival as such. But it's such a beautiful sandy beach down in Devon, and if you get the weather there, there's no place like it on earth. I don't think it's beautiful.
Lovely stuff.
So I love it. I've got a massive family connection. I've been going my whole time with my wife, and so I've been 22 years as I've been going to Exmouth every year, and I love the place. Absolutely love it. So I just think that would be a great place to have a festival on Exmouth Beach.
I agree. Never been picked for Fantasy Festival before, so we're definitely going to Exmouth Beach. So before we talk about the 5 acts, Ronan, I'm quite aware of how difficult it is to literally get all your favourite acts down to just 5 to play a fantasy. Are there any acts that you want to mention quickly who you love but just aren't making the lineup into Xfest?
Oh yeah, well this list could have been about 5 million acts long, but I've got it down to Luke Kelly, the Irish singer, who's an absolute what a voice. And I have a rule: you never question Luke Kelly. You know, he was the man. The Clash, the Jam, this was coming out of my grunge days. I then started to appreciate who my brother was, for one. So he's on the list, Elvis Costello, and I really loved his early stuff more than the stuff that it was sort of like, this is like the 90s. So by this time, so I went back to the late 70s and the early 80s stuff, and that's the stuff that I really love of his early stuff. So then I started getting to other new wave acts and other sort of post-punk bands. So the Clash, the Jam, the Who, I've rediscovered through, as many kids my age did, through the relaunch of Quadrophenia after Part-Life. After Part-Life came out, and then everyone rediscovered Quadrophenia. So the Who became a thing. So that was another massive band. And the Police, another band. So there's lots of Squeeze. These sorts of bands were bands that I discovered in my sort of later teens, that I just really got me into the art of lyrics and songwriting, and the Clash especially, just for pure attitude. And I have to mention my sister-in-law, Diana Krall, jazz singer, Elvis Costello's wife, Declan's wife. She is just unreal, unbelievable singer. I mean, just whatever, if anybody wants to, I highly recommend A Case of You by Diana Krall live. It was live in Paris as a live in Paris CD, and it's mostly jazz stuff, which isn't really my bag. I have to say, not really a big jazz head, but she sings a Joni Mitchell song, Case of You, and it's a live version, and it is flawless, and it is by far and away the best version of that song, or possibly any song that anybody's ever done. not to big it up too much, but so she's definitely on the list as well. And then Frank Sinatra, but this was a really close run thing he was nearly on the list just because of the Wee Small Hours album. He was nearly the album choice. So if we're going to get Frank Sinatra, he's singing the Wee Small Hours. But so he was on the suspension, unfortunately, for this, because I had to go with something that I listened to more. I felt like that was the best way to approach it. But I nearly did the headline as the last but one, and then had the last slot be a chill out slot with Frank Sinatra, Wee Small Hours, and a cup of tea and a biscuit. And that was nearly how I approached it. But I decided to go big for the headline act, as you're meant to do with the film.
Absolutely.
Rather than it being a completely selfish move on my part.
Great stuff. You mentioned some amazing acts who aren't making it in to Xfest. So I guess let's talk about the acts who are. So 2:00 is time Xfest will start for your opening act. We're going to get an hour to play. So Ronan, who are you going to have open Xfest?
Ron Sexsmith.
Great shout.
He's a singer-songwriter I could listen to all day, and I have done. I've listened to him, and I'm one of those guys that kind of, I think actually Ian Prowse, who was on your 50th episode, who's a friend of mine, I listened back to his, and he was he very much mirroring what he said. When I listen to something, I listen to it like back to back for about 6 months. And I had probably a year and a half to 2 years of pure Ron Sexsmith in my car going to and from gigs. His lyricism is just unreal. He takes a little phrase and changes it around, and the way he plays with words and tells little stories, and it's just, I just find him absolutely mesmerising as a songwriter. So he's someone that I could listen to all day, and an hour certainly would not be enough. But I realise Xfest can't be 6 months long, so I'll take an hour.
Great stuff. So Ron Sexsmith is opening X-Fest. He makes his first Fantasy Festival appearance, playing from 2 till 3 o'clock. We'll take a half-hour break. That'll take us to 3:30, and it'll be time for your Super Seconds act. So Ronan, who's going to be your Super Seconds act?
DeLaMitre. Now, a similar sort of thing. I mean, I actually got to interview Justin Curry during lockdown. I did a little YouTube music show called the Need to Know Music Show, and I got to interview him, and it was a massive thing. We kind of got on quite well, and he said I didn't ask any stupid questions, which
Always
was great. I'll take that. But he's just been, again, it's just his lyricism and his voice, and what a great band. And I just love all his albums have great tracks on them, and I don't think there's not many tracks that I skip on any of his albums, to be fair. Just an absolute genuine songwriting hero for me.
Great shout. DeLaMitre making their first Fantasy Festival appearance as well. So they're joining the roster X-Fest. They're playing from 3:30 to 4:30. So 2 acts down, 3 acts to go. It would take us to 5 o'clock, and it'll be time for your Midway Madness slot. So who are you going to have follow DeLaMitre?
This is my album slot. It's my album choice. So I'm having the Lemonheads Shame About Ray album.
Great stuff. I take it, you mentioned Lemonheads earlier. They've just been over, right? And they've been playing that album in full at gigs, and I saw loads of videos and regretted instantly not going and getting myself down to the Roundhouse.
Yeah, I saw them do it in Shepherd's Bush Empire.
Right.
About, it must have been 10 years ago. They did a similar sort of thing where they played the album in full. Evan Dando is just, his voice, his vibe, is just so cool. It's like you can be cool, but you'd never be Evan Dando cool. He's just he's just such a dude. And that Shame About Ray album is one of those albums that I never tire of. And I can put it on, and I tried to approach this whole festival vibe with, I thought I could go kind of, trying to think of the stuff that I love that's cool and whatever, try and put something. I thought I'm going to go with stuff that I keep coming back to. And these are bands that I always come back to, and Lemonhead's Shame About Ray album is an album that I always come back to, and it's still good. And it still sounds fresh.
Yeah, but
he's still cool.
He's still well cool. I listened to it off the back of seeing all the videos that were going on after they played the Roundhouse, and they still sounded great. And I listened to the album, and the album still holds up. It sounds as contemporary as today.
It does. It really does. And there's some great. I love, if Ron Sexsmith is great at wordplay, and DeLaMitre is a great storyteller, Justin Curry is a great storyteller, then Shame About Ray is just really great little lines, little sort of conversational lines that go in there. Things like pour the milk and I'll say when. It's just such a beautiful way that he puts that in. It's just like such a normal thing to say, but he's just really great at that, and it's just so sort of laid back, and it just and then there's got some real rockers in there too, and it's just fantastic mix of those two things. As you can probably hear from Back to Zero, there's a lot of influence of that idea of mixing up the sort of chill out and the laid back and the melancholy with the sort of rock and roll, a bit of humour in there too. So he's a dude. So that's my album in full choice, because I knew they had been doing that anyway, so they'd know it.
Yeah. I love it. So Lemonheads, unbelievably, first time Lemonheads have been picked for Fantasy Festival lineup. They've been mentioned a few times on this podcast, but never been picked for Fantasy Festival. So they finally get to play a Fantastival, which is great stuff. So they'll play from 5 till 6. That'll take another half-hour break. Then that'll take us to your pre-headline act slot. They're going to get 6:30 to 8 o'clock, your pre-headline act. So Ronan, who is going to be your pre-headline act?
Crowded House. So my oldest son is called Finn.
Oh, really?
After Neil Finn, yeah. And there was just when I come out of the grunge era, and I sort of was kind of then moved on to the sort of the post-punk stuff. I started playing Irish music then, and I started playing acoustic guitar mainly. And then Crowded House were just that Woodface album was just really jumped out at me as a kind of I started writing more acoustic songs then, and then that Neil Finn was just, his lyrics are amazing. He's so great at creating a sort of a landscape with lyrics, it's such a beautiful way he puts words together is so beautiful. And I just absolutely fell in love with his voice, and I went to see them this year, as I was saying earlier on, and he's still good. He's still good. And his son Liam is in the band now, and his son Elroy is on drums. And Nick Seymour, the bass player, was one of the most melodic bass lines you'll ever hear. He's one of the most melodic bass players you'll ever hear is Nick Seymour, and it's beautiful. And the way they put the songs together, and they have a brilliant way of having ugly, pointy, kind of jagged kind of guitar chords, and then suddenly just having this serene chorus come out of it, and it's just that they're so good at that, creating moods with their music. And I used to listen to, there was a couple of live things. One was the Flyer at Finsbury Park, they played in '94, and I just wore out that videotape of that, of the recording of that. And their Farewell to the World is just a masterpiece, live album from Sydney. So just amazing. So Crowded House is just, and the harmonies, especially when you had Tim Finn in the band and they did the brother harmony thing, I felt really real affinity to that, because me and my brother Rory sing a lot of harmony stuff together, and we always got Crowded House comparisons. And when we did our acoustic duo around Twickenham, which we did for years, we played so many Crowded House songs. It was just, we were pretty much a Crowded House tribute band at one point. Yeah, just a band that I always come back to and always think of.
I must ask you about Finn and his views on Crowded House. I hope Finn likes Crowded House. Is he a Crowded House fan, or is he a bit like, no, if you like him, Dad, I don't like him? It's far too cool for us to listen to stuff like his dad listens to. Gotta say.
I mean, I could be Evan Dando and I still wouldn't be cool to Finn, because he's my son, you know. But no, he's much more into. He's more sort of come back to things like sort of Radiohead and things like that. He does listen back to albums. I do try and set him some homework sometimes, but he's a real music listener. He does deep dives into bands. So he spent he was that GCSE crowd that didn't do their exams. So his summer started in March. So he's basically spent the whole of that lockdown just listening to Radiohead. So they've just discovered CDs at university now. He's at university, so he's like, "Dad, have you got any CDs?" And I go, "Yeah, I've got Crowded House. Get onto it."
Amazing. Crowded House, unbelievably, their first Fantastival appearance as well.
I must have terrible taste.
No, mate, it's just what it's all about. I love the way you've approached this by what you said. It's the stuff you always come back to. So Crowded House are making their first Fantasy Festival appearance. They're going to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, 1.5 hour break. Then it'll be time for your headline act. We're going to play from 8:30 to 11. Now, I've got a feeling, Ronan, I know who you're going to pick, I reckon.
Can you guess who my headline act is going to be?
But I'll ask you the question anyway, like I ask everyone. Ronan, who is going to be your Fantasy Festival headline act?
The Cheeky Girls. No, it's not. It's it's Pearl Jam, unsurprisingly, because they were my first love musically, and the first band that I owned. You know, when that feeling when you're a 14-year-old and you discover something, that was Pearl Jam for me. I love the way they put the songs together. That idea, because I've always played guitar and sang, so I've always sort of played chords and sort of backed my own voice, and that kind of put the songs in. The two things are kind of linked. Whereas Pearl Jam have effectively two lead guitarists and a singer completely separate from that, and the bass players. So everyone's just playing one instrument, and the way they put the songs together, the way that the guitar lines intertwine with each other, they take turns in playing guitar solos, and you get different kinds of approaches with the melodies, because Eddie Vedder's not involved in the music, he's just doing the lyrics and the melodies, and that just creates these completely sort of different approaches to songs, and the way they're put together I just think it's amazing. And I kind of lost them for a few years after their album Vitalogy. I listened a lot to 10 and Versus, my two favourite albums. But the last few albums have been really, really good. And I kind of lost this when they went really punky and heavy in the middle. I kind of lost them during that, and I was getting more into more acoustic stuff. So I went to see them at Hyde Park this summer, and there's lots of set I don't really know. And it's kind of really weird, because it's like my favourite band in the world. But there's some albums where they've sort of covered a lot of ground, and they've come back to their more melodic stuff in recent years, which just really is where I love them. I do love them when they rock out. They're kind of good, but it's not. I'm much more of a melody kind of a guy. You know, when I can't really hear what you're saying, it doesn't really link it. Doesn't really do it for me. But yeah, it's definitely Pearl Jam for
Great.
Such a good. Just trying to cram into, what is it? How long have we got?
2.5 hours, which is relatively short for Pearl Jam.
Well, it would be. I nearly put Bruce Springsteen in that slot, to be fair, but I thought he's never going to cram his 9-hour gig into 2.5 hours. But there's a few bands that could have been in that slot, and I think U2 were worth a mention, probably, and that was worth possibly a mention for the Joshua Tree album. I went to see them do that at Twickenham, and that's an album that always still is good. There's a few bands that could have been in that slot, really, in that headline slot. U2, yeah, but Pearl Jam is definitely going to be Pearl.
So Pearl Jam, unsurprisingly, not making their first Fantasy Festival appearance. This is the 4th time Pearl Jam have been selected. Interestingly, though, U2 have never been selected for a Fantasy Festival, which I find...
It's not really cool to like U2 anymore because people don't like Bono, but they're actually a really brilliant band, as are Coldplay, and they're not really. It's not really cool to say Coldplay either, but people forget how bloody great they are. They really are good, and how they've reinvented themselves to be this sort of stadium band. I don't do musical snobbery, and I always think, oh, Chris Martin, all the things that people say, and then you watch them and you go, they are really good.
Yeah, Joe. So, I felt that
so
they've done like 3 nights at Wembley, and I was I've got no interest in seeing Coldplay, and I watched the videos of like Fix You, and everyone's got their lights on, and he's in the middle of the stage. It looked great.
Went to it and he said it was just absolutely amazing. Yeah.
It looked brilliant.
There you are.
It looked brilliant. So Pearl Jam, a headline in X-Fest, 2.5 hours. They're going to play to 11 o'clock, and at 11 o'clock they're going to bring back on Crowded House, the Lemonheads, Del Amitri, Ron Sexsmith. I'm also going to let them bring on Brand New Zeros. They can also bring on the BibleCode Sundays. Anyone else you want on that stage, just whack them on, Ronan. Let's make a celebration. All get to play.
It's Wheel on Frank Sinatra. Come on, get him up. Get him up there.
They all get to play one song together to close X-Fest. So what are you going to have them play?
Long December by Counting Crows, which is, Counting Crows were another band that could have made any of those lists. I didn't mention them because of this. I knew I was going to talk about them now. So, but they were a band that I just loved that August Everything After album when it came out, and the only thing that I went to see them actually, Shepherd's Bush Empire, very young lad, just after that album came out, and I went to see them, and I was disappointed because he doesn't really sing the melody lines from the album, or he didn't sing the melody lines as T-Bone Burnett had. T-Bone had kind of created that first album, and I could see that he'd kind of disciplined Adam Duritz a little bit in the melody lines, and he didn't sing the songs anything like they were on the record. But the recent albums, they match the live matches much more the recordings, because he's had more freedom to record them how he wants to, so they naturally sound more the same live. But Long December is a beautiful track, and I just listened to it the other day. It was on my Understanding Sadness playlist that I rediscovered, and it's such a beautiful song. And my Elvis go-to first was The Wait by the band, because there's so many verses to it, and there's lots of harmonies, and I thought it would be great with all these bands that are harmony based. But I thought so many people must choose The Wait, because it is one of those songs that everyone plays when you get bands up together. So I thought I'm going to go something more personal to me, and that's Long December by Counting Crows.
I love it. So you've gone through your lineup. So let's lock your Fantastival in. So we've got X-Fest taking place at Exmouth Beach in Devon. Your opening act, we've got Ron Sexsmith, Super Seconds, Del Amitri. Midway Man, we've got the Lemonheads, who are going to play It's a Shame About Ray in full. Your pre-headline act, Crowded House. Headliners, Pearl Jam. And for your encore, all of your acts are going to come out and play Long December. Ronan, sounds like an amazing fantasy festival to me. You happy to lock that one in?
Lock it in. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
When did the tickets go on sale?
Yeah. Amazing lineup. I love that. So I guess before we
finish,
finish,
all alive as well, which is the main thing.
Yeah, and do you know what? And they're all still touring to packed houses every night, which shows you the quality. You know? It could do. You're gonna have to get on the phone
50-50 on it.
You're gonna have to get on the phone to Mr. Crowe.
I'll ring Exmouth Council. Let's do it.
Yeah, drop Russell Crowe a DM. So I've got a great idea to make some more money for you. So before
I might call it Crowfest if he needs it to be Crowfest. I'm happy enough.
Great stuff. So before we finish up, Ronan, what do the next few months look like for you? Obviously, you've mentioned new album, you're hoping to tour out. What the next couple of months look like for you?
Yeah, I do music day to day anyway, so there's plenty of singing going on. I've got I'm trying to get out there, do more of my own stuff, so I'm out there in the Fiddler's Elbow on the 13th of December, which I think is the day this gets released.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Sunday the 13th, there's an all-day at the Fitters Elbow in Camden. I'll be down there with my guitar. I want to get out there next year and do a lot more of just getting out, telling the stories behind the songs. And I got to do the support stuff with Ian Prowse, and I just loved playing those songs and explaining it to people. And I thought I just want to go and do this a lot more. So plans are next year to get out and about around the country. So I've got a gig in the Slaughtered Lamb, another London gig at the end of January, Friday the 26th, I think, whatever the Friday is, around there. And then looking at one thing which sort of materialised out of nowhere is I'm going to walk the Thames from where it's a trickle out in Gloucestershire, 186 miles to the O2, and then I've got the Indigo at the O2 booked. So it's going to be do various gigs along the way, because you hit some big towns like Reading and you've got Oxford, obviously Reading, Marlow, Maidenhead, Windsor, and then you get into London and all along there. So yeah, been looking to do that with a friend of mine who's I'm sober 5 years. He's sober nearly a year now. So I want to do it for mental health awareness and addiction recovery awareness, and the idea of getting out, walking and talking. You don't have to walk 186 miles, just walk in the park or something, but want to invite people down and raise awareness and raise some money for some great charities. So the plans are in place for that. That's probably going to be the end of April, start of May. It'll take us nearly 2 weeks to walk the Thames, and we'd be doing gigs along the way. So if you live anywhere along the Thames, look out for that and come down and walk a leg with us. We invite you to walk with us. Don't have to do the whole 886 miles. We'll do about around an average of 10 miles a day. So feel free to join us for any of it, or just come down for a chat, And then I'm looking to get around the country, maybe to do sort of Scotland and the Northern England and Ireland and stuff. So we're looking to get out. I want to look to go out and play some music, but I'll be around and about coming to a town near you if you live in the towns that I'm going to.
Superb. So let's plug the music then, Ronan. So if anyone's listening and isn't aware of your stuff, you can be found on all major platforms, and we've got obviously the Brand New Zeros, the BibleCode Sundays, your own solo stuff. So plenty of stuff for people to immerse themselves in of your material.
Yeah. I've got stuff on Bandcamp under Ronan MacManus and also under Brand New Zeros. If you go to Fretsaw Records, that's a good place to find our stuff, and also other artists on Fretsaw, which is really great. Ian's a really great guy who just loves music, and it really shows. You can see the kind of bands that he signed. It's fantastic. So yeah, can't recommend them highly enough. So just go out there and just main thing is, I would say, is just not just talking about my music, but any music. Support the artists that you love, because if you don't support them, they won't be able to keep doing what they're doing. We don't get any money from String anymore, so try and find a way to buy a T-shirt or a mug or whatever it might be. Just support the artists. Try and find a way to give them money directly, because we're already struggling, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better. So buy a vinyl, buy a tape, buy a CD, a mouse pad, or a apron, or whatever they're selling. But that's one thing that's a real bugbear of mine, is how do the musicians keep making music? It's a real problem at the moment. Streaming services aren't working for artists or audience at the moment. So we're trying to find alternative ways to go and see people live, because that's the best bit. And honestly, you won't regret it. Live music is magic.
It certainly is. So if anyone wants to give you a follow on social media to keep up to date with your activities and your live dates, where can people find you if they want to look you up?
I'm Ronan MacManus, or Ronan MacManus Music, or R MacManus Music. R MacManus Music it's at MAC as well, MAC, so that's on Instagram and Twitter, and then I'm Ronan MacManus Music on Facebook. I'm on TikTok even.
Oh wow!
Which is I know I'm not doing any of the dances, but certainly playing music there, and just trying to. There'll be lots of stuff happening, loads of acoustic tracks and content going up there. So just get involved and come and say hello.
Great stuff. Make sure to go and give Ronan a follow. So that is it. Thanks to everyone who's listened to the 110th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. And if you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe and give the podcast a review on iTunes, or you can rate the show if you're listening on Spotify. Ronan's on social media, so is the podcast. So we are on Twitter. So if you don't follow us on Twitter, go and look up Fantastival P. That's where you can find the podcast. Unfortunately, don't play music on this podcast, but I'll get some tracks from Ronan. We'll make a nice little Spotify Spotify playlist, and we'll link that to the episode so people can go and listen to some Pearl Jam, Crowded House and Lemonheads and go and immerse yourselves in those acts. So Ronan, a massive thank you for coming on the podcast. I mean, how have you found it? You've come across as a really passionate, enthusiastic guy about music, and I think you've been honest with yourself with your lineup, which I think is always the best way to be. But how have you found it?
Absolutely amazing. It's been great. I just love what I do, and I just love listening to music, and the sort of the bands that I always come back to, as I felt that was the best way to approach this, sort of to be this. These are the bands that I never tire of. These are the artists that I never tire of, and the reasons why I hope are clear by the reasons that I gave. But I've really enjoyed it, and thank you so much for having me on. And it's such a great format. I love it, and I'll be going back and listening to the ones I haven't heard already.
Oh, very kind of you, Ronan. Very kind of you. I've really enjoyed listening to you talk music, and can't wait to see you and catch up in the future, and hope next year goes well. So that, like I said, is it. I'll be back with episode number 111 next week, so please make sure to join me. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word, and that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.